Hello, hello. Hello, hello, everyone. Thanks for joining the Zoom call and the WhatsApp call. I hope you guys had a good weekend, and everything is going well where you are. I'm just as I said, I'm in Cape Town. Our power has been out for the last few hours, but it just came back. So that's you get used to those kinds of things. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm sorry about on Thursday, when we didn't have a call. I've just been having visa visa problems and things like that, but it all seems to be sorted now. So as you can imagine, lots of queuing in home affairs and that kind of thing. But anyway, I wanted to get into two things. And I think one of them, especially the editing, I think is going to take a little bit more time than one of these short calls. And you're welcome to kind of contact me directly or, in the group as a group. But I often find that like when we run these kinds of sessions, the idea of thinking that everything can get kind of sorted very easily around editing audio is a little bit foolhardy. Can take people, if you're not familiar with it. If you're familiar with it, you can pick it up and get into it quite quickly. But if you're not familiar at all, it can be a little bit of a steep learning curve. And I don't want people to feel that then they have to, to be scared off, basically. So feel free to contact me about like what package you're using, what package you might want to use, all those sorts of things. So let's start. Let's go over a little bit like voiceover and music. I think people that are this is sort of for people that are used to recording their voice, this will seem quite easy. But that idea of getting used to your voice, if you're not used to it, can be a real difficult thing. I just wanted to ask if anyone had any thoughts or questions around, particularly around voiceover and recording your voice. Let's start there. Has anyone got any thoughts or comments that they'd like to make around that particularly? Yeah. Hello? Did someone want to say something on the WhatsApp call?
Personally, I use I work regularly here from the person. Personally, I use application to work sound. And first, I use an early version of 2022. So it takes years. This one was launched by when I used to edit some, and it's very well. It about Odyssey and in promotion to use it effectively. I know that all people use it now, it as it's more effective. As I'm in to begin with.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sounds.
Okay, so you're very soft there. If you can just speak or maybe put your volume up a little bit, but like what, so you, okay, so sorry, I just, can you just repeat the question just at the end there?
We're just talking about how I'm hoping to begin with cool edit, Audacity, because personally I use regularly cool edit, another application 2.1 to edit sound. It edits very well, but it was launched 21 years ago, so it's not aids for many things that you can want to do today.
Oh, wow. So wow.
I'm absolutely open to go on Audacity. I download and notion a course about it to use it as for me good one. But I know that other people use Adobe Audition now to edit their sounds, but in the course you talk about so I guess that is a good way, because I see his the script of cool edit Audacity is a little bit easy to use.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone else has anything to say about that, but I would just say that I think Audace, I haven't used that much of Audition, but I used Pro Tools for a bunch of years, and it's good to use, but actually has now become quite expensive. They've like lock you in to paying a monthly fee, which is quite frustrating, because back in the day you used to just be able to buy the software. And now like lots of software you can't actually buy it, like you have to pay a subscription, and that can actually be quite costly. What do other people think? What does anyone else have any other suggestions in terms of software or editing and that kind of thing? Okay, I see that we've got a question. Ubakan, is there a particular audio setting for podcast, or is it an individual choice to make? Well, I think maybe in terms of, I would just like to clarify in terms of audio setting. There are like particular settings around loudness for podcasts, which I think can be important in terms of like your final mix. So not particular, it kind of comes from that fact that like you are, like it or not, your podcast is kind of consumed among a whole bunch of other podcasts on a podcasting app, probably, right? Either Spotify or Apple Podcasts or another one of the podcatchers. And actually, you just want your audio to sound at least at the same level and similar to some extent to those other podcasts. You don't want people to be listening to a certain type of podcast from another country, maybe, or wherever, and then they come to yours and they have to rapidly change the volume and change the settings on their phone or their computer. So I think that's the main thing that you're trying to do. You're trying to almost like integrate, like assimilate into what the other people have done. And I'll post some things on the group around loudness settings, but that's really in kind of a mix. I would say what you're really trying to look for a podcast, more so than music, I'm not a musician, but more so than music, is you're looking for consistency across your episode. So I think a lot of what your final mix, and this isn't in kind of editing as such, but like in your final edit, like to fine tune it, what you're sort of looking for is this sense of like getting everything almost the same. Like there will be slight differences, like when someone shouts or something goes loud. But I think what you want to avoid is the sense of like, music comes in and it's very loud, and now someone has to like kind of knock the volume down on their phone to accommodate the fact that your music is too loud. I mean, that's similar. That's always been similar for like audio broadcast and that kind of thing. But I think it's really important for podcasting. And I think the thing is if you are in radio broadcast initially, there is a change in the fact that like the settings will be lower, like in terms of volume. Like I know initially when I got into podcasts, we were using producers who were used to audio, like radio broadcast. and the material was often like really high, like really blown out and really leveled off. So I know I said everything needed to be of a similar volume, but if you look at the audio, this it's getting maybe kind of technical, but like if you look at the waveform of like a radio broadcast, it is like exactly, it looks like there is no form. It's just like a blast of identical sound. And that's different from a podcast, right? Like you want it to sound sort of similar in terms of its volume, but it's still got some sort of shape. So and we were finding that like producers who were working in broadcasting, they moved to podcasting. This is years and years ago. People were like blasting out like this sort of very consistent but like very loud broadcast, and we found out that it's because most like transmitters and radio desks lower the volume when they put it out, but obviously you don't have to accommodate for that in podcasts. Anyway, that's just something to say that like the settings are mostly around what we'd call loudness. It's like a loudness setting, which can be found on like quite a lot of mixers and audio software. And I'll post something in the group around like that. It can get quite technical to go into it on this call, but like it's not complicated, and you can usually find like a program that you can just run your audio through, and it will make it the correct loudness, if that answers your question. Are there any other thoughts, particularly around editing and that kind of thing? I guess what I would like to say around editing is that you have to there's a few things that I would say about it. First of all, like, you know, obviously we sent out the lesson today, and it's like tips and tricks and like don't cut out the breaths and all that stuff. But really, what you're trying to do with editing is like you need to listen to your audio quite a lot, and you're really trying to get the rhythms of an edit, especially if you're doing this sort of narrative documentary editing that we're talking about. You're really trying to get the rhythms right in terms of, you don't want little mistakes, you don't want things, but you do maybe want, you don't necessarily have to cut out like every and r and all those things. You don't have to do that, because sometimes an and an r from someone that you're interviewing can indicate that they're unsure of themselves. You might want to communicate that unsurety, if you know what I mean. So it's, I'm not saying that like everything has to be entirely clean if the story dictates it, but by and large you want things to be clear, and you want things to be people to be well spoken. But then also with editing is that you can get used to it, you can get better at it, and you can get faster at it. But often I find that like you can do, you guys will find that you can do very fast edits, right? And as you get better at it, you can put things out very quickly. But at the same time, you might want to spend the time actually on the edit. And that sounds strange, because obviously, you know, in that way, like time is money, and you want to try and do things as quickly as possible. But at the same time, like I often find that you'll spend time planning an episode or a series, you'll spend time producing it, and then when it comes to editing it, like also using that time to kind of think about your story, and if it makes sense, can also be done in the edit. So as I know it's time consuming and it can be difficult, and you want to try and have the option to do something very quickly if you can, but at the same time, often like that time can't really be avoided, because that's also how your story gets better in the edit. Is there anything else anyone had about editing or editing software? I know that in the material, I've sort of pushed Audacity pretty hard, and that's really because it's, in my mind, the best free software. It's not the best software. So I'm not like you must definitely, I'm not like you definitely must go to, you must definitely do Audacity, but like at the same time, it's the best free software available. Can I just ask, like, people on the call, can you just mute yourself if you're not speaking, please? Thanks. So yeah, so then I wanted this lesson to sort of be an opportunity to for you to sort of dive into editing kind of head first, right? So the other day we did an exercise where you guys interviewed someone, and sort of in the material, it's sort of like an extension of that, but obviously you don't have to use that. And if you didn't do that interview, then that's fine. Really what we're trying to get to now is that we just want you to dive into like how to edit as best as possible. So you want, you know, and the best tip that I can give you is that you shouldn't do fine editing at first. It's sometimes an impulse for people to kind of jump in and start editing ums and ahs and getting like a few minutes of audio really clean. And I would really strongly advise against that. What you want to do is you want to do the big chunk edits first. You want to really kind of go for broke in terms of like maybe a good, you know, you might talk to someone for 2 hours, you might talk to someone for an hour, you might only be trying to make a 20-minute or even 10 minutes of this interview, the section of an episode or a package or whatever you're trying to do. So really what you want to do is you want to go in strong in terms of cutting the bits that don't work. Also, I think another thing, especially if you're writing voiceover, the thing to kind of keep in mind is that maybe someone spends, you know, 5 minutes explaining something when you interview them, and you could probably explain that in a few lines, like 2 or 3 lines. So while you're editing, this is something that I picked up as I went along, was that yes, someone is rambling and they're not really making sense, and we all interview people like that, but there is something in there, buried in there, that's important of what they're saying. And you might need to convey that in your story, but you can't convey it in their words because they just are taking too much time and it's too confusing. So really, as you go through your edit, you also want to extract the bits that you're taking out. You want to, you know, mine for gold, if you like. You want to extract those nuggets and put them into your voiceover. So that's a large part of the editing process in this kind of storytelling is, yes, it's an edit, but also you're like, okay, this person spent 5 minutes rambling about this, but it's important, but it's not 5 minutes important. You know, like the more you get into editing, the more everything takes on like a kind of hierarchy of how important is this, you know, and the importance is all about time, right? It's like time in your story. And people, I mean, you know, we're all journalists, we all know that, but if you're in print and you'll think about that in words, now it's like in minutes. So it's like, sure, we need to convey that, but what's the quickest way we can convey that? And, you know, facts largely are quite quick, often to convey. But the other things that we've been speaking about in this course in terms of character and emotion and story are often quite long to convey. They often take more time, actually. Well, not more time, but they often can't be shortcut. Like you obviously can't, you know, if you're trying to build suspense and character, you often can't just like take the quickest route to building that, right? So what you want to do is as you're editing things out in that first initial edit, you want to try and make notes around what you're cutting out in case, so you don't want to lose important information just by trying to make things as short as possible. And I kind of want to stress the idea that even though you are got a lot of episodes and time, and it might feel a little bit daunting in terms of like you're making this thing that's like several episodes, you are still always, especially in edit, trying to make things as short as possible. And often I found, I've just finished editing a series now, and during that process of trying to make things shorter, everything pretty much stayed the same length in terms of actual time. But what happened was, I like to think, is that I cut out the stuff that didn't work and then added in more information that needed to be in there. So ultimately, like the final minute count was actually very, very close to what it was when I started doing like the final edit, if you like. It was all edited together, but just felt that it needed another go. And it was remarkable how everything sort of almost stayed the same length, but then I cut a lot out. But then also through that process, you're like, wait a minute, there needs to be more context here. There needs to be a bit more backstory here. There needs to be something more here. So I think that's something that kind of comes with like a rewrite if you're in print, but essentially the thing that I always find still daunting is almost the idea that you're going to go back into this kind of different program. You can't just like go into a writing like Word and rewrite something. You've got to kind of go back into this thing that's all colorful and graphical and start editing it all again. And that can be kind of daunting, but like obviously rewarding in its own way. The last thing I just wanted to say before I let you guys ask any questions is this idea of editing, and I mentioned it in the material, but like you want to still make things sound human. And I try and touch on that in terms of like mistakes, but it's not just that. It's like if I don't know, yeah, you'll realize this more and more as you listen to more podcasts. But that idea, as much as everything I've just said about trying to make things shorter, you're not entirely bound to it in a way that like radio is. You're not entirely bound to the second, right? In that way. So if a few seconds will make someone sound more human, will make an edit sound more natural, rather go in that direction, because podcasting is a much more like intimate kind of like people are expecting a sense of ease a little bit, rather than like this has to be the fastest thing they've ever heard in kind of like a news bulletin sort of way. And I totally don't mean to say that in terms of to delete what I just said in terms of making things as short as possible. That comes down to like almost respecting your audience. But at the same time, like you want things like if you need to take a few seconds of music to let a emotional point sink in, take those seconds is what I'm trying to say. And like, and that all comes down in the edit. So don't feel that you need to rush, I guess, but do be respectful. I guess that's a difficult balance sometimes to hit. Okay. Well, do people have any thoughts or any questions before we move on? Okay. So just today, for today's task, I want you to, and maybe you can put in the chat afterwards, maybe you can just put in the chat like what your programs are that you're using. That would be, I think, very helpful for everyone to kind of get a sense, because audio editing is still in this weird thing where no one, like one program has not dominated in a way that some other things have, right? So there's still like Audacity, there's still other programs, there's other apps, there's Audition, there's Pro Tools, and people kind of like, it feels to me that certain pockets of where people have learned, certain programs have dominated. Like if people have gone to like more of a sound engineering school, then they probably know Pro Tools. If they've gone to more of a journalism school, they probably learn Audition. If they've kind of picked it up on their own and they have limited budget, they learn Audacity. There's another program that I've started using because I find Pro Tools too expensive. It's called Hindenburg, which is sort of built for podcasts specifically. And it's still not free, but is much cheaper than Pro Tools, which is frankly an overkill if you're making podcasts, right? Because it's a huge music development program. So that's why I moved to Hindenburg, and I'm still kind of like slowly learning that program. And I think that it would be useful if everyone can kind of communicate which program they're using. And then just for today's task, you need to kind of work at finding the story. Like I say in the lesson, like if someone is just relaying facts, but there is always a version that has a beginning, middle, and an end. And that's the editing, right? So there's fine editing, there's fades, there's cutting out the ums and ahs, but the big hit edits are like moving the point of the story, which actually should be maybe at the beginning chronologically, to the beginning. And maybe the person you interviewed said that at the 27th minute. And you know, because we all speak in a mostly unstructured way. If we're not on stage, if we're not giving an interview, if we're not on TV, then the way people speak when they get interviewed especially the more emotional the subject matter to the person you're interviewing, the more unstructured they speak. So often find if you speak to experts and they are good at what they do and they speak well from their field, they actually will speak to you in quite a structured way, which is great. But if you're talking about something very emotional that's happened to someone many years ago, they are often all over the place. And, you know, the edit is about like pulling that back together and kind of constructing a story that makes sense to someone. So what I want you guys to do is just to take an interview. Maybe you've done it for this course, but maybe not, maybe at a different time, and just to bring it into your program, editing program, and then try and find a rough edit of a beginning, middle, and end. And I would encourage you to kind of like, even if you don't share the audio, just share a few comments around what you found. There's another component to this, which is the more logistical component of editing software. And there's a few, I'm going to stick to Audacity and you know, and that's why I wanted you guys to share what you're using, but I'll share some like tutorials, right? Because on the one hand, there's the sort of like creative side of editing, which is what I'm talking about in terms of beginning, middle, and end. And then there's the kind of like just the logistical keystroke, you know, knowing which buttons to push kind of side. And depending on which part of that process you guys are at, well, depending on how much fun it is, right? Because often that beginning part is a little bit steep in terms of learning. So I'll post some tutorials for Audacity on the group as well. So for those of you that are a little bit new to this, you can at least kind of start to try and pick it up. Okay. Are there any other questions or any other thoughts or comments or advice to anyone else that you want to give around your editing experience? Okay. Okay. So, yeah.
Editing is a very complicated task, particularly when you have many so as you say last week, important to assure that we put the most important parts in order to be more flexible when we are editing. And what other things I've learned is that we have to be, as you say in the course, regular in editing. So when you edit and you got experience, when you get experience, you begin to be more and more familiar with your application. And if I'm done with techniques, you can have some liberty when you are creating to add down, add or to put. And so it was very important. I say this, I'm not a specialist of sound, but I just think if we do it regularly, it can be a good edit.
Brilliant. Well, thanks so much for that, those comments. I think it's really useful for people to share their experience. Is there anyone else got anything else to share around audio editing before we go? Okay, then we'll just wrap that up. But as I sort of tried to say, this is, yeah, like I think like we've all said, this can be quite a process. So as you start, as you get going, feel free to share in the chat or WhatsApp me directly, or any thoughts or any queries that you have, because I think that's also what can happen with audio editing is you can kind of start and get kind of frustrated and you just like, forget it, I give up, you know, and like a lot of things, I think audio editing particularly, but once you kind of get past that frustrating stage, it can actually be really rewarding. So, and then you'll have like, you know, your podcast edited and you'll be able to show people to listen to that. So let's pause there. Take it onto the chat. Let me know what programs you're using. So everyone else, I'll put some tutorials from YouTube in the chat as well. And then we'll chat again tomorrow. So thanks very much. Cheers, you guys. Bye.